It's really my honor to be here, and I really, really appreciate this opportunity. I'm going to share with you something about mob programming. Does anybody here know of mob programming? Let's see a show of hands. So most of you have heard of it at least. Does anybody do it? 3 or 4 of you, 5 of you. You need at least 5, 4 or 5, so that's good. Okay, so I'm going to talk about an aspect of mob programming, something we noticed in doing it. And this I ended up calling the question queue time, based on a study that I had, or a set of work that I'd done about 15 years ago at a company that was having a lot of communication problems. And one of the things we identified was this idea of the question queue time. I want to warn you right off the bat, I'm not here to tell you what you should do, or whether or not you should do it, or how to do it. I'm sharing with you some things that I've done, and how I think about them, and why I did them. And that's hopefully going to give you some ideas. It's going to spark some ideas with you. But I don't expect you to do things because I've done them, or want me to reason out whether or not you should do them. So this is about mob programming. Mob programming is a little bit of introduction for you. It's all brilliant minds working together on the same thing at the same time, in the same space, and at the same computer. The first 3 things to me is what Agile is about. And the last one puts a very fine point on it, that we are working at the same time, same place, same thing, if we're all at the same computer. Okay, so this is the way I like to think of it. We're going to have everyone that's needed to work on this software working together at the same time. And this is a critical thing. We get to have some advantages out of that, and that's what I'm sharing with you today. You can think of this as like being at NASA, where they're having a mission. And in that mission control area is everybody they need to do this mission. It's not just a few pilots doing this. It's not just somebody there who's figuring out the payload distribution and all that. It's everybody that's needed to do this mission at the same time. And that could be, in this case, for our work, a tester, a product owner, a couple developers, a database expert, a designer, an architect, whatever it takes to do this work. We're all going to work together on it. It looks like this from the front. And actually, in this case, I'm going to point out real quickly, we have a tester, enterprise data expert who we're doing some work for, an enterprise programmer actually. I was a programmer, Chris was a programmer, Sandra was a database expert, a DBA. Gordon was an expert in applications used throughout the company. And Dexter had started as a tester. By this time, he was a full-fledged developer, because that's what he wanted to learn to do. We didn't really invent this, but I think we sort of identified this as a thing, and it's become sort of well-known around the world now. This picture, I think, was taken a year before I was born, and that looks to me like their mob programming. And they even, you can see up here, they even have the Scrum Master making sure they're getting their work done. So, once I started talking about this, I noticed a very common question that got asked almost every time I talked. Almost every single time. And it was usually the first question. Because it seems impossible that this could be a reasonable way to work. It seems preposterous. And the question kind of would go like this. How can 5 people be productive at one computer? How could this be? And my initial response to this question was, I don't know. And we just noticed that we are more productive. So I can't answer everybody's questions. As a matter of fact, I usually can't even answer my own questions. I use questions in a different way than seeking an answer. And I'll share with that you with that in just a moment. I said that backwards, so somebody's going to have to splice the film and move that around. If we ask this question, what we noticed was when we worked separately, we got a certain amount of work done, and when we worked together, we got a whole bunch more work done. Now, getting work done is not necessarily a valuable thing. Getting the right work done, that's a valuable thing. So, at first when people would ask that question, I couldn't really answer it very well, and I think it's sort of the wrong kind of question to be asking. So, I got this computer block, and I love this. Transformation comes more from pursuing profound questions than seeking practical answers. And this reminded me of something that my dad used to tell me. Do you get what this is saying? This is telling us that we don't wait. We're not seeking an answer. We're seeking a better question. And my dad would say, he almost said the same thing when I was a kid. This is him as a kid. my father, and he shared this with me. He was an engineer. He would say, when I get a question that's kind of doesn't seem quite right, I try to ask it in the opposite way. And this is, he called this, let's flip this over. And the flipping over looks like this. How can we be productive if we separate the people that should be working together? Same question, asked from a different point of view. This is the separation. Can we be productive separating the people that should be working together? We separate them by time, we separate them by space, we separate them by the thing they're working on. It can be really difficult to get people together to talk about something, so we have to schedule meetings. And some of those people haven't thought about this project for months because they worked on something months ago. I even had a project once where we were having real trouble getting through a particular feature. And so we asked for permission to talk to the person who wrote the description of what this feature was supposed to do, or this functionality. And we had to go to our boss so they could go to their boss to get their time to come and spend an hour with us. So we got to talking out, really this is what had been happening. We spent a week getting further and further apart in our own understanding. We started out thinking we understood it, and then as we went along, everybody felt they had a different understanding. When we brought that person in to look at this with us, we handed the document to him. We said, we just need some clarification. Could you read this and tell us what we need to do? Guess what they said? I don't know. And they said it like this. I don't know what I was thinking. Could we ever do that feature now? Guess what? We couldn't. Because the person who wrote the requirement didn't even know what they wanted it for. If we all had been working together, we wouldn't have had that problem. When they first had the idea, we would have turned it into code, right away. So I wanted a better question, and this is the one I landed on that really helped me the most. I could judge both of those other questions better if I had this question. And my dad would have said it's something like this. He would have said, when you land on the right question, it kind of resolves itself. You start going, oh yeah, okay, I understand what this is about now. And he was a pretty brilliant guy, and as I look back over the years, I've used his advice over and over again. Because as soon as we came up with this question, we made a list, the team and I, working together on this, made a list of about 50 things that destroy productivity. Now, I usually do this as an exercise, but with this many people and the amount of time we have, I'm just going to say, the kinds of things are technical debt. If we have code that's hard to work on, that's going to destroy productivity. Bugs destroy productivity. Documents we can't understand. Comments in the code that make no sense. On and on. What is the number one thing do you think that destroys productivity? You're all mostly developers, right? What keeps you from getting your work done?
Meetings.
Meetings is the number one thing that I see and that I notice. We have lots of meetings to try to come to an understanding about something, and then as soon as the meeting's over, the only person who really feels that they enjoyed the meeting was the one who called it in the first place. But as soon as it's over, we all kind of start becoming misaligned again. And meetings, I was at a place, this was a shame, just a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, and I noticed the developers working at their computers about an hour and a half a day. And so I started talking to them and said, what are you guys doing? And they said, well, we're in meetings. And what are the meetings for? Well, it's about things they might want to do next year. And I thought, boy, this is, if you're supposed to be getting some work done, that's not helping you. It's destroying your productivity. At the end of the week, they're going to ask you, why didn't you get your work done? Well, I got called into this meeting, and I got called into that meeting. We made this list, and we ended up dividing it into these buckets, and there are other buckets. Now, I want to make it clear, we didn't set out to solve a single one of these problems, but we noticed this. As soon as we started working as a team, these problems started fading away for us. Now, we could do a whole workshop on just what these problems are. We're just going to talk about one of them. But I have this glorious animation right now I want you to watch. These problems faded away when we started working as a team. That took me hours to put together. So I have to point that out, or else you'll just say, hey, this guy's lousy. This is PowerPoint, by the way, and I have learned how to make fades happen, so that's pretty special. So I'm going to share with you one kind of problem in one of the buckets. And this we already identified as being the question queue time. And the question queue time, this is how I describe it. The amount of time that we must wait to to get the answer to a question that is blocking us. A blocking question, think about that for a minute. What does it mean to be a blocking question? Think about that. When we have a blocking question, tell me, what does that mean?
We don't get any work done until the question is answered.
We don't get any work done until the question is answered. Now, I've had managers tell me when I say, hey, I'm blocked on this, they say, oh, just keep working on other stuff and save up your questions. Yeah, so I can't take another step because it's blocking me. It makes no sense for me to keep working on this. So I'm going to share with you this kind of a, how do you use a value stream map? Do any of you use value stream maps in the work you do? Good. I'm not going to explain fully what it is, but I started using them somewhere in the early 2000s, and it's been really helpful for me. So you might want to look up what they are and at least use them in a rudimentary way. If we use a value stream map, we can look, in this case, the top line, the green stuff, is us getting work done. In this particular case, the red is indicating when we're blocked. And we can't go on because we have a question we cannot answer for ourselves. As a matter of fact, the only questions usually on a project that we can't answer for ourselves somehow is the questions about the product itself. Like Google, what is my project supposed to do, will not reply anything useful to you. Right? You can look at Google and say, how does this feature work in my database? How do I set up this kind of a stack? Whatever it is you want to do, you can find the answer, except for you can't say, what did the product owner mean when they said this? Google will just come back with thousands and thousands of answers that are not related. You have Google here, right? Okay, good. When I first started doing search engines, we didn't have Google. We had, I think Alta Vista was the first one I got familiar with. I don't even know if they still exist anymore. So I'm going to make a very kind of simple example. This simple example is, for every hour, what if we came up with a question that was blocking us? So if it only took us 0 time to get the answer, then we would be able to be productive all day long. But if it took us even 2 minutes to get the answer, we have a context switch that's going to happen, and in the meantime, we're losing a little bit of time, but not much. What if it's 10 minutes? We're losing an hour a day. What if it's an hour to get the answer? Now this is contrived. You would never have this in real life, exactly this clean, but we'd be losing half the day. What happens if it takes us a day to get the answer? There's the fullness of it. How often is it that you can't get an answer for a day or two? That will slow us down a great deal. I worked on a project once where we could only talk with the product owner every Monday for an hour and a half. They didn't call them product owners in those days. And I actually did a value stream map of that and recorded that we could have done the project in about 2.5 weeks, but it took us almost 6 months. How much do you want to pay for the question queue time? So, how do we typically solve for this? We got a blocking question. What do? Work on something else. And if you're the person who put together the slides, you can make it so perfect that when you do this, it looks like we're busy all the time. But being busy isn't a good thing. Busyness is a symptom. We say they're not busy enough. That's a symptom. The problem is we're not getting answers in a timely fashion. So that's how we typically solve for it. The problem is we've introduced a problem to solve the symptom of another problem, and this is inventory. Inventory is right waste. Anything that we're, basically this is what inventory is. Work started on, not yet delivering value. Every bit of inventory we bring into our process is waste. We need to be delivering stuff. So how did we solve for this? How did we solve for this? You know, I told you earlier, we didn't solve for this. We didn't try. All we did is we turned up the good on working well together. And all of a sudden, we were getting a 0 queue time for any question anybody on the team had that could be answered by someone else on the team. And that left the product owners to be still the biggest bottleneck. But we tried to work with our product owners daily, and we considered them part of the team. And so they would actually be with us at least an hour or 2 a day, and the best of them sort of committed to answering any question we had. If they weren't in the room, we would message them, and they'd get back to us within 2 minutes. And if they couldn't outright answer the message, they would come over and spend time with us. They'd send a note saying, I'll be right there, and off they'd come. So this turned it into a very short, and this is eliminating the question queue time. What we've introduced here is the idea of automatic one-piece flow. And now I want to talk about flow. Flow comes in at least two flavors. The one from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I've been trying to learn to say his name. And this is sort of what it is. This is a state in which a person is so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. There's like 8 different features of it. Complete concentration on the task, a clarity of the goals and rewards in line with immediate feedback, transformation of time. Time speeds up or slows down. The experience is intrinsically rewarding. We just love doing it, whatever it is. It's effortless and with ease. There is a balance between the challenge and the skills. Those of you who have worked in the gaming or games industry, you understand this. This is how you keep people playing a game. They love the challenge, and it's just hard enough that they can't easily do it. This is part of flow. Our actions and awareness are merged. We just do things. We're in the flow. There's this feeling of control over the task. This is not the flow I'm talking about, but this can also be thought of as being in the zone. I'm not going to go through all these. I'm going to just bring them out. This very similar thing, being in the zone while you're working. And we want that, and we get that when we work alone, but we can also get it with a team. These are all good things, but this is not what I'm sharing here. I want to talk about a different kind of flow. This is the flow as in lean flow. Each story flows directly from idea to completion without interruption. It's directly. If we use that value stream map, the green is getting the right things done, and we're working on the right thing at least. That's going to include exploration and discovery, which we do better as a group. And the waste is waiting, merging, arguing, discussing rather than doing, and so on. We optimize for the flow of the work rather than for the output of the individual. This is what we found with mob programming. The question queue time for us just disappeared because we were turning up the good on working well together. We're not seeking to get the most out of each person. What we're doing is we're looking for ways to get the best of each of us into everything we do. I love this picture, by the way. So this is the thing. This is what I've come here to share with you. When I first started working with the team that we started doing the mob programming, at the end of the first hour and a half, everybody said 3 things. They said, "This was fun. Man, we got a lot done, and now I understand the problem." And at the end of that hour and a half, somebody came to the meeting where we were in. We didn't go in there to do mob programming, but when we ended that hour and a half, we had started doing mob programming. We were looking at a problem together, and we started working on it together. And we were noticing all of our questions were getting answered immediately. At the end of that hour and a half, when somebody came in and said, "You have to leave the room, we have this scheduled," somebody on the team said, "Let's go find another room." And across the company, we had 30 or 40 meeting rooms. It's a big company, 2,500 people. And we went and found that other room. And as soon as we got there, somebody else said, "Well, why don't we just schedule a room for the rest of the day? See if we can get a whole room for a whole day, or the rest of the day." That night, we were doing retrospectives at the end of every day. That night, we had a retrospective, and everybody said, "Well, why don't we just do this tomorrow?" That was 6 years ago, last month, and we've continued working that way every day since then. But instead of going from room to room, we found a room to work in. It's expanded out now to 9 teams. So that's the question queue time. I think if we have a few minutes for me to take a question or two, and then we'll lean coffee, we'll sit out there and do that. I'll be happy to join in with that and answer questions there. But do we want to, we could spend a little time answering questions here. Anybody have a question? Oh, there's one.
Question.
Yes.
Yeah, do you use one keyboard or several?
We use one keyboard, but we will have several available. We use one at a time.
Yeah.
But for example, if you prefer the Swedish keyboard and I prefer the US layout, we have different keyboards to accommodate. We actually have members of the team that use Dvorak, Colmac, and QWERTY. So you have to be able to switch really quickly. So, and sometimes we can use the same keyboard for that, but some like more ergonomic and some like, but yeah, it's one person typing and they're not really the programmer. The rest of the team is the programmer. The person at the keyboard is an extension of the computer. Does that make sense? They're there so we can work at a higher level and just they translate it into code. There's a lot to it. You have to hire me to come do a workshop. Not really. Any other questions? Yes.
Here.
This is how we get our steps in today.
I was just wondering how, the driver, if that person has to convert thoughts into a product or function, if that person doesn't know how to code, how do you solve that, like a tester?
So if the person taking the keyboard wants to take the keyboard but doesn't know how to code, then we'll bring the detail level down to a level they can understand. So if let's just say you were really a competent coder, and I were to say to you, what I want to do is let's bring up the customer object, and I want to extract an interface so we can use a strategy pattern to bring in some other types of functionality. You would probably be able to start doing that without me saying anything more until we got to the point to talk about that specific functionality. And if I could say here, then I would say, no, there's these three methods are the ones I want to extract out. You would know how to do that. But if you were a beginner, I would say open up this file, and then what we're going to do is let's go to this first thing and click on this so we can navigate at the level the person accepts. What will happen is we'll all become better at explaining stuff, we'll get better at asking the right questions, and after a while it's just very productive. So that person who couldn't code becomes someone who can. But not everyone's required to take the keyboard. But if they're on the team, they're there because they have knowledge we need. Not necessarily each person having all the knowledge or each person having all the skills. We've combined. We have one super team that has all the knowledge we need. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions? Do we have time for more questions?
Yes. So that's an extension of the strong pairing.
So this grew out of strong pairing, which I had learned from Zuill Falco, who essentially invented it. Arlo Belshi gave it. Oops, did I shut that off? Sorry. Arlo Belshi gave it a name. But basically, strong pairing is for an idea to go from someone's head into the computer, it must go through someone else's hands. And that means we're going to get good at communicating, listening to each other, explaining ourselves, asking each other questions. Maybe another question?
How do you do testing, and what kind of testing do you do in mob as opposed to non-mob?
So first of all, because the testers are on the team, they're there helping us understand what might be difficult about the testing. We're going to automate everything we can, but there's still maybe some manual testing, and we do it as a team. So all of the work of the team is done by the team. Now sometimes we might find we want to split up for a while and all separately do something. Maybe we're all testing the same functionality individually, that's fine. It can be very dynamic. You can have us all sitting at the same computer for a while, then we split up in pair, split up in solo, and back and forth. It can happen within 5, 10, 15 minutes. We're doing this for 10 minutes, that for 5 minutes. And a lot of the teams I visited do this all the time. We mob when it's really realistic to do it, and we split up when it's not. We tended to mob to be together as a team all the time and stayed in the same area. But it's different everywhere I've been. Another question.
Hi, so in your experience, how much time is too little time to get programming to work?
Too little time?
Yeah, so for example, is 1 hour too little, or do you
Oh no, yeah. If you've practiced it and become good at it, then you're going to gather together and you can be effective immediately. So as soon as you go, oh yeah, we better do something, we just do it. It could take a minute, it could take 5 minutes, it could take an hour. It's not going to matter. It's just not going to matter. So it's just like anything you're proficient at. You know, when you walk into the room and say, you know, can you show me how the printer works? We don't limit that to being an hour long. We're going to do it till we learn how to make the printer work. So you can think of it as event-oriented rather than time-oriented. I hope that answered your question. Often I don't quite get the question, but I think what you're asking is how much time do we need before we shouldn't have bothered getting together. But we need to be good at it. We need to practice it to get good at it first.
Last question? Yes.
Last question.
How much time do you spend
before you switch drivers? Ideal.
Ah. So there's no right way to do any of these things. I want to make that really clear. I share what we did. We originally had a 4-minute timer, and we eventually grew that to... I keep doing something here that's ruining this. I shouldn't move my arms at all. We grew it up to about 15 minutes, and now at Hunter, where I do not any longer work there, I'm out doing this all around the world, they've compressed it down now to about a 6-minute rotation. So each 6 minutes, there's a new person at the keyboard. But I've worked at some companies where they do it much longer, and some where they switch without a timer. It's just like, I don't want to type anymore, and someone else takes the keyboard. Remember, the person at the keyboard isn't really coding. They're translating the ideas. They're not programming in the traditional sense. When we're programming, we're thinking about problem space, we're thinking about the solution space, and we're thinking about code. When we're mob programming, we leave the solution and problem space with the team, and we just allow them to give us their ideas and we turn them into code. So it's a little different thing. If you cannot switch quickly, then that's a skill to get it. Matter of fact, we practice that when I do the workshops. That's one of the things we practice. Let's just move away from the keyboard as quick as we can, let the next person take the keyboard, and realize that it will just keep going. It's not, I've actually had people when we're doing these exercises, they'll be typing, the timer goes off, they'll stand up with their fingers still on the keyboard and start scooching away until they can't reach it anymore, because they don't want to leave the keyboard. So that's a habit to break. Programmers are sort of like attached to the keyboard, and it's hard to separate. Oh, is this coming out for you guys? I think that's an indication we're done.
So thank you very much, Udi.